The Winter Olympics in Beijing are slated to begin from the 4th of February, but looking at the patchy human rights record of China in the Xinjiang province and the subversion of autonomy in Hong Kong, human rights groups around the world have described the Winter Olympic Games as an attempt to sports wash its human rights record. The executive director of Human Rights Watch has called on nations around the world to boycott the upcoming Winter Games. According to him, not only should there be a diplomatic boycott, but everything should be done to highlight the human rights abuses perpetrated by China on the Uyghur minority Muslims.
The Chinese government is clearly trying to use the Beijing Olympics to whitewash or to sports wash its horrible repression. Everything from the crimes against humanity being committed against Uyghur and other Turkic Muslims in Xinjiang to the crushing of basic freedoms in Hong Kong. And so at a minimum, the international community should join the diplomatic boycott of the Olympics. That is to say, don't send senior officials that pretend everything is normal. Human Rights Watch has not called for the athletes to boycott. This is, their moment. But we believe that everything should be done to spotlight particularly the mass atrocities, the mass detention in Xinjiang.
Kenneth Roth also insisted that Beijing will use the Winter Olympics to sports wash its genocide and suppression of individual freedoms and democratic rights in Hong Kong. And the only way it will succeed in doing so is if the United Nations and other democratic nations around the world don't speak up for what is right.
Sadly, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has been absolutely silent on Xinjiang. He refuses to speak critically about the Chinese government. This is an enormous moral failure of the Secretary General. Michelle Bachelet, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, has been willing to speak about Xinjiang, but in her case, the big task is to finally release the report. And we hope that that's imminent.
An estimated 1 million Uyghur minority Muslims have been held in internment camps and in the course of the last decade have been subjected to some most gruesome human rights abuses, including torture, forced disappearances, sterilizations, the demolition and erasure of their symbols of cultural heritage. In November last year, China faced a lot of flack over the disappearance of its tennis star Peng Shuai after she accused a former top Chinese official of sexual assault. Following the United States, Britain, Canada, Australia also announced a diplomatic boycott of the Winter Games, where athletes from these nations will compete at the Games, but the diplomats will give the Winter Games a miss. But of the 90 nations that are taking part in the Winter Games, most nations have chosen to look the other way. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.